Welcome, or hopefully welcome back to another episode of the Reliability Matters podcast. For those of you who are counting, this is episode number 164. Today, we're tackling a topic that has become increasingly vital in recent years: supply chain management. With global supply chains recently under immense pressure from disruptions, shortages, and growing complexity, the need for smarter, more efficient solutions has never been greater. And what better way to explore this than by discussing the cutting-edge role of AI-powered supply chain management software? My guest today is Sebastian Schaal, the founder and CEO of Luminovo, a company at the forefront of transforming how supply chains are managed in the electronics industry. Sebastian holds 2 master's degrees, one in electrical and computer engineering from the Technical University of Munich, and another from Stanford University, where he was a Fulbright scholar focusing on management and computer science. Before founding Luminovo, Sebastian gained diverse industry experience working on AI algorithms for signal processing and computer vision at Intel and robotics companies NavVis and Magazino. Additionally, he served as a consultant at McKinsey, advising on data strategy. He and his team are leveraging artificial intelligence to streamline processes, enhance collaboration, and future-proof supply chain operations. In this episode, we'll explore how AI is reshaping supply chain management, the unique challenges facing the electronics industry, and what companies can do to stay ahead in an ever-changing global landscape. This conversation is packed with insights that you won't want to miss, so sit back, relax, and get ready to learn about the innovations that are revolutionizing supply chains worldwide. And we'll dive into that when I return in just a moment. Stick around.
Welcome to Reliability Matters, a podcast for the electronic assembly industry. Each episode covers topics related to reliability, best practices, and environmentally responsible assembly techniques, with insights from experts across the electronic assembly industry. Now, here's your host, Mike Konrad.
Well, welcome back. Sebastian, it's good to see you.
Very good to see you, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Thanks for agreeing to be on. I really appreciate it. Let's start with kind of your background and the company vision as we get deep into this subject of supply chain management software. What inspired you to work in supply chain management, and how did you recognize the need for innovation in this specific space?
Yeah. So in general, I think Timon and myself, we when we were kids, we were always super inspired by, Garo Gilu, who's like the inventor of things, and you always felt that technology is kind of probably the best tool that we have as a society to solve the biggest challenges we have in our day-to-day world. And when we think about like physical products and innovation, I think electronics is probably the most ubiquitous technology that's out there. And when we were kind of looking, okay, what is actually the bottleneck for these cool new things that are shaping our day-to-day life to see the light of day earlier, and ideally also cheaper and more sustainably, we've kind of realized that the idea to market-ready stage of electronics is still managed in Excel spreadsheets. There's lots of data that's thrown around, and that's probably where lots of time and resources are wasted. And when we found that, we felt, okay, this is probably something that we should be looking into, where supply chain software, generally software, can really make a difference. And we came to that problem when we were still kind of an AI consulting business. That was the first 2 years of operations in Luminovo. We worked with a lot of companies in the semiconductor space, but also generally hardware companies, hardware OEMs. We were exposed to that space before. Now, almost 5 years ago, we kind of shifted the whole company towards building software as a service products for electronic specific industry specifically.
And what drove you specifically to the electronic assembly industry or the EMS world? Supply chain is worldwide, right?
Yeah.
Everyone needs a supply chain. What made you focus on us?
Yeah, so I think we were trying to look from a first principles perspective, looking at the whole value chain from, as I said, from idea to kind of market readiness, and see who does what in that space, and where do we actually see that like there is a gap for software to make, and there are issues that software could potentially solve. And when we looked at these different stakeholders, we then, like from a first principles research, identified the kind of contract manufacturing or EMS industry, that is, I always say, the unsung heroes of the electronic supply chain, because very little people outside the industry really know about them. The names, even the big ones, are maybe Foxconn of known, but then after that, it gets pretty like lighted when people don't know about them. And we felt that they are really doing a lot of heavy lifting in the supply chain, but no one knows them. And that's the typical kind of hidden champion industry where we, specifically in Germany, right, we are like a hidden champion industry country, very much drawn into. And we also felt that one, they had a real problem to solve, which is in that sense, the quoting piece of the electronic assembly is where one, you're having a customer demand that's thrown over the face, but you have to answer a lot of supply chain questions very quickly to even get the chance to compete in that bid and to make revenue. And we felt that's a perfect melting pot of like urgency and like data that needs to come together very quickly to really move the needle here. And we felt that this is a great nucleus for us to get started and then also potentially branch out, building more solution left and right. But you always need like a good first wedge, a beachhead market where you really feel that you can make a difference and you can also become like a leader fairly quickly.
Yeah, and I'm sure every industry probably will claim this to be true for them, but it does seem like for our industry, the EMS world, that we were hit particularly hard with supply chain issues because, the entire supply chain shortage started off being coined, even in the civilian world, on the nightly news. It was the chip shortage, right? It was our industry specifically that was the poster child for supply chain issues, and then it became an egg shortage and a tomato shortage and a whatever shortage, right? Fill in the blank. But we were certainly known throughout the world, even by civilians who aren't part of our world. They were aware that chips were in short supply. If you tried to buy a car, deliveries were delayed, and if you wanted the latest television, in some cases, some features were delayed on that because of chips. So, you certainly chose the right market for having the world focused on supply chain challenges. This industry specifically. You didn't have to do a whole lot of education on that. Now, you started this company before the big supply chain issues that happened as a result of post-COVID madness. So that's good timing. I mean, all of a sudden you're building this company that builds supply chain management software, and all of a sudden supply chain got in the news, and that was good timing. I mean, good timing for a tragic event, but it was still interesting timing. How much did the focus on supply chain due to the chip shortage and the whole post-COVID stuff, how did that land on your business? Did all of a sudden, did your emails blow up and your phones ring off the hook? And, how did that land on you?
Yeah, so I think in general, I always say we think we were probably half a year too late. Otherwise, we could have accelerated even more quickly because there was still some homework for us to do. And as you said, we made the switch in like March, April, when COVID was just about to hit and the crisis was right after. So we were just in the early innings of building that software. However, I think what definitely changed is that usually I would say the industry is rather like a closed industry that's not like so open to talk about solutions. Everyone was used to do more of their own stuff and specifically not to talk to an outsider like that we were at the time. But I think for us, it was great because people were open to take Zoom meetings or team meetings, which they wouldn't have normally done, and were open to talk about their challenges. And were actually looking at some of our prototypes, which were just click dummies, but they were so high fidelity that some people didn't even realize they were click dummies and felt really, oh, wow, they were amazing. When can I have that? So I think what really changed for us probably was the validation velocity that we had, because people were open to talk about those challenges and we knew, okay, we're probably onto something. That's, I think, the one big element. The other element is, of course, that some of the features that we felt on more like side features. For example, like monitoring a specific component that's not in stock anymore and getting alerts when they're back in stock. That was like a high runner feature, of course, in the shortage, which is now more of a nice to have again, right? So I think these
Yeah.
a little bit of a reprioritization of some of the features that we
Yeah,
initially saw
that went
when it
from
built in sequence.
that
Yeah.
went from a nice to have to a must have, and
Exactly.
hopefully back to a nice to have.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's still, yeah. So it's good to have it, but yeah, the usage has definitely gone down, which is of course great news for the companies in general because they can finally build stuff again. Yeah.
So, what are the key challenges? Limited to 300 or 400 challenges. What are the key challenges you've observed in supply chain management, particularly within the electronics industry? And we all know about the supply chain shortage. So maybe just outside of that anomaly, what are the challenges that might be unique to the electronic manufacturing world?
I think the one big thing that many people don't realize outside is that there is the part catalog that you have in electronics of off-the-shelf components that are pre-manufactured, that engineers choose, that have to be chosen specifically to really make the design work 100% is in the billions, right? And managing, I think there's no other industry where you have to manage such a vast catalog of components, where a small mistake can really make or break your product. And if you want to swap a component against another, they are very distinct alternatives. Some parts are okay, so passive components use with specifications only. But this alone is like a complexity that many people are simply just not aware of if they come from like just the mechanical world where you just specify a screw and you can just take any screw in the world. The same thing, of course, comes with, okay, if that manufacturer of that component is like out of business or can't ship, like I'm not going to get this anywhere else, right? Because the semiconductor that is built in there has long lead times. And I think that is just the one big thing that many other supply chains just don't have. In addition, I would say the PCB is one of the most complex custom components that exists, right? Sandwich layer, like super tight knit like wires and so on. And I think these things, making them right, is just from a design perspective a huge challenge. And then the other topic is, of course, then the complexity of the supply chain, because you have to like distributor manufacturer duality. Sometimes there's then people like brokers making use of the non-transparency that exists to still this big like Asia versus the Western world kind of intransparency. And all the lack of real-time data in that case, one on your internal stuff, connected to the actual catalogs, connected to the supply chain, that is in a sense already like a huge complexity. And if you now sprinkle like regulation and compliance on top, like you're almost in a perfect storm. And I think these are the things that also, when you look at just on the software side, all the other supply chain relationship management tools or supply chain tools that are not purpose-built for the electronics industry all kind of fail when it comes to exactly these like key characteristics.
Yeah, interesting. How do you see technology transforming the way supply chains are managed today compared to, say, a decade ago? And I realize that we're in dog years here, so in the electronics industry. So a decade ago is like 500 years ago for other things. But what's changed over the last 5 or 10 years?
I think the one big thing is we still call them catalog items, right? Because they were used to be sent, like they were catalogs that were sent out for you to choose like which components to use. And I think going away from like a distributor, like intransparent catalog world into like a actual always up-to-date global catalog, I think that idea of having like your design is always like always on, always connected to the real world data. I think that's like a huge change that allows to do many different things downstream. Same with like, okay, you just have data internally, but versus having real-time intelligence, like that really helps you to see this design through. And that comes back to our original idea of like design to market readiness. How can we make this like cheaper, faster, more sustainable? And I think that is the big technology change that we see. One, connected systems that can really talk to each other. And then, of course, once you have like systems that are digital, you can also shift some manual processes into some AI-driven processes. And I think that's the main change from manual to AI-driven real-time decision-making systems. And that allows you going from reactive to a more proactive or even predictive supply chain management. And with these technologies, digitalization and then automation, and of course collaboration across the chain, taking form and shape.
Yeah, and speaking of artificial intelligence, what role do AI and machine learning play in modern supply chain management systems?
I think you can probably segment this in a few different worlds. Unfortunately, one of the big challenges we still have is that there is a lot of distributed data that's not standardized, but there are some like at least evolving standards or best practices how to structure it. So one, I think, big use case for AI still is parsing some data that sits in whatever unstructured form into structured data formats that can then be the basis for many other things. So I think that data processing is one big use case where AI or specifically also machine learning systems as a subset can make a difference. The other is generally then workflow automation that sits on top. That's more complex, maybe decision making units where you can offload something to either like a rule-based expert system or like a stochastic system. And then, of course, you could also try to find some past patterns, and give you somewhat of an idea of, like in a forecasting realm, what might happen in the future. Of course, you can never predict the future, but at least have some form of like a risk analysis that's forward-looking to help you make those decisions. So that's, I think, the three big buckets that where AI can really make a difference in supply chain management.
Yeah. In addition to AI, there's other advanced tools. How can advanced tools help businesses predict and navigate supply chain disruptions and such as those caused by like a global crisis, like a pandemic or a tsunami, or name your wildfire, name your tragedy. How do these advanced tools really help with those types of disruptions?
So I think the first big topic is transparency, right? So how I think also the chip crisis, there's lots of like word on the street that there's like the bullwhip effect that's all driven by intransparency, people living up to the hype. And I think you have to buy. And there's, I think, many things where if you would have perfect information, you could act more rationally and make just better decisions. And having that information flow seamlessly is, I think, one of the big the big use cases of advanced tools that are like more connected, more open, can transport data more quickly. And that's, I think, besides the AI part that's trying to maybe just fill some gaps that are unknown, like the big advantage, I would say, from more modern tools. And then, of course, again, if like something happens, then like a crisis, then to just quickly have systems that kind of can drill down, how does this affect my supply chain? This is like my tier 1, tier 2, whatever supplier. Is this directly linked to my design? That comes again back to every part of the chain is somehow digitized, right? Then you can really do what in the beginning, early what if scenarios, but also if something happens, you can drill down and see if that has an impact, and you can build a scenario and model it a little bit better. And that allows you for better crisis planning. So again, it comes down, in my mind, digitalization, more connectedness, more transparency, and then you can use some algorithms to do some simulations and see what if, and also react if events occur, and with more rationality.
Yeah, we talk about transparency being important, which I completely agree. The other is collaboration. So what are the key elements for fostering better collaboration between manufacturers, suppliers, and other stakeholders within a supply chain?
But in my mind, you have to you have to eliminate friction on both sides. I think that's always the key ingredient. You hear a lot of the times is like the buyer like pushes the supplier on some form of a portal that makes their life easier, but the supplier has a lot harder time of doing manual data entry. And I think there are lots of like win-win situations where it's not like a trade-off, that you can invite customers to collaborate effectively on some portals. And if you have to put the hurdles down, it means like from small things like ways to go with a magic login without having friction of logging in to just provide information, but also with like data entry that's seamless for the supplier as well. So I think that's the main connectivity to additional systems. So how can you make sure that the collaboration is somehow embedded in the workflows that already exist today, or you have like a very low hurdle, no friction for those people to talk digitally? But I think in general, it's always a good idea to move communication from, unstructured email that lands in someone's inbox to something more digital, where you have information in context about the supply chain, what's going on. And of course, you can also connect that to your even inboxes, right? You will get notifications, when you can send some email to a magic inbox that then parse it into a digital shape. But having that digital backbone as a part of the collaboration is important. And yeah, then that allows really all stakeholders to create win-wins. There's accuracy. You can build, you can trust on the data that's there. There's a clear system of record, and people are not like spending hours of understanding what's the latest version. So that's already something where collaboration can really like accelerate if you're not like sending V1, V5, V16 around, but you can always look at the current state of the union and make an informed decision together.
I would imagine most larger companies, tier one EMS companies, for example, within our industry, and large OEMs, they're very familiar with supply chain management software packages, programs, and things like that. For smaller companies that may, do all their purchasing off an Excel spreadsheet and memory and tribal knowledge, what are the most significant benefits that businesses can gain from optimizing their supply chain processes with modern technology? When I say modern technology, I mean solutions like yours and others that automate the process. What are the most specific benefits that land on people?
Yeah. So I think in general, there's lots of, it depends on which part of supply chain you're looking at, right? But if you think about, the contract manufacturers, EMS, there's this quoting element that they have, which is about, making new business. And I think that's one element. Then you have the procurement side, where you're trying to source the right components and make like most cost conscious decision. And then of course you have in theory also downstream processes, monitoring supply chains, or like automating some processes. In general, I think you can break it down by like what are internal productivity gains or cost optimizations, where you might, if you have skilled labor shortage, you're not finding new people are retiring, you can basically probably have 5 people replaced by 4 people in software. Yeah, if you this is where it's just automating like sourcing processes, procurement processes, data cleaning processes. That's just, I think, the automation piece of it. But then, of course, one of the benefits you gain from then more speed and less reliability on a single person is often even more interesting. So on the coding side for an EMS company, we see that companies that are coding faster and more accurately, they can often increase their top line by 10, 20% because it's a competitive business. And if you're like ahead of the pack, then that's great. The other thing is on the sourcing side is that we talked about these billion of components, right? Billions of components. Then you have like thousands of suppliers. That's quickly like a very high dimensional grid, and finding the really optimal solution on a spreadsheet by a single human is often not going to yield you the best results. So here, really optimizing for all the variables that you might have about lead time, price, supplier, deliverability, is something where the machines are just extremely good at. And that's why I think really reducing waste, having on-time deliveries, really reducing costs, because you're finding the best offer that you can for your specific use case. And we see companies shaving off 3 to 5% normally on their material spend. And if you're in contract manufacturing businesses, probably 50% of your revenue is material spend. So it's a very large lever that you have. And when it comes, of course, to the last piece is probably this like kind of an insurance against some, as you said, black swan events or risks, that you're just like, you see some things earlier, you get alerted earlier, so you can react more proactively. And often that comes down to like avoiding some very large costs, or potentially seizing an opportunity of, this is a market I should now enter, or this is like a thing I should just buy. And that's normally when we build a business case, it's mostly about the efficiency gains are great, but I think the biggest levers are really, is there revenue impact because you're just like more competitive in the landscape, or is there like a cost savings component? I think these are the most interesting ones where people are seeing the immediate benefits. Even if you're working with the same workforce, you can often do more with less or more with the same, and scale a business without scaling headcount.
So in the supply chain management world, there is software that's industry agnostic, and there are different industry-specific vendors, often different modules in the supply chain space. Why would someone choose one over the other, an industry agnostic approach or a specific vendor, approach? What are the advantages either way, since both are available?
So I think if the industry that you're in is not that differentiated, mostly really thinking from the data model perspective, thinking about supply chain stuff, if it's in a sense and a purchase item that you need, and it doesn't really, for you it's the same if it's like the data container contains like we need a plastic part or metal part, but it's still like one number you have in the ERP system. It just contains a file, and there's a list of manufacturers you have to talk to. And the data model is similar to many other industries. Then you're probably better off in just using a horizontal solution, because often horizontal players can cater a larger market. That means they scale better. That means you probably have like a more cost-effective solution for you. I think that's probably, if you can go for something horizontal, then it's probably the more cost-effective choice for you. However, if you realize that your industry is very different, has some very different like fundamentals, connections in the supply chain, where these systems just fall short, and you have to start to really pay a lot of consultants for SAP or Oracle to kind of like re-architect the ERP system to kind of really fit your needs and fit your mental model. That's a telltale sign for you that you're probably in industry where you should think if they're like industry-specific vendors that are really building on the data model that your industry operates on. And then, of course, if you have like a vertical solution on that data model, some of the players, again, to get to scale, are kind of forced to not just scale across a lot of industries, but are forced to scale across different modules. So because then often it's, if you have that industry data model, it's, if I already have like supplier relationship management tool, I could launch a configure price quote or CRM tool for that similar industry that is maybe only like has 20% or 30% of the features of Salesforce, but for this industry, it's actually even better, right? And that allows you then to build like a suite of tools on that fundamental data layer that's really catered to that industry and is often better than the more feature-rich horizontal tools. And we believe that the electronics industry is such an industry with a very differentiated data model, that's why we are leaning so much into like pick a vertical solution when you are in the electronic supply chain.
You kind of answered my next question, which is great. One of the earlier questions I asked you was, what made you choose the EMS world to launch this company? I guess my next question, which I think you pretty much answered, but maybe there's a few more details you can provide. What makes the electronic industry so different from the farming industry or the widget or furniture manufacturing industry and things like that? I mean, there's certain commonalities. I imagine there's a high percentage of commonality. Someone's purchasing nails, someone's purchasing MOSFETs. It might as well be a nail. But what makes our industry so unique that a consumer of a product like yours would be drawn to a industry-specific, not company-specific, but industry-specific, whether it's agnostic or not? How is our industry different in the fundamental ways that make a purchasing decision to go with something within this industry sound?
I think really mostly comes really down to semiconductors are probably the most advanced piece of manufacturing or technology that we are building today. So it's at the nanoscale. I think nothing else comes close to this. Which what does that force us to do? It forces us to have very, very dedicated manufacturing facilities for these like high tech components. So that means not everyone can build in a backyard. Building a semiconductor fab costs billions and like years to ramp. Okay, that means you have specialization. That means like if you're like in a sense an OEM of these components, you have to either build a fab yourself or line up in these facilities to kind of build those components. And that of course already the time to one idea to launching one new component is long. That means you can't build something bespoke for everyone. There's of course ASICs you can build, but generally you can't build something bespoke. This means you have to build something off the shelf. So that creates this like large catalog, these Lego blocks, and like where you can build everything with Lego blocks. But the problem is with these Lego blocks, if they're out, it's not easy to get them replaced. I think that kind of huge catalog system and having these blocks which are like that advanced is in a sense the biggest issue. That means you have catalogs, you need to manage alternatives for specific blocks, and that is already from the data model perspective and how the supply chain are then also structured with distributors and so on, as I mentioned before. That is in my mind the fundamental difference. Where because if there's this one nail is missing, I could in theory find like another supplier down the street, or even I could build up my own nail manufacturing business in my backyard, but I can't do that with a semiconductor. And that's, I think, the biggest, everything else is a derivative of just having this most advanced technology I think that humans created as an important puzzle piece of things you want to build on top of this like amazing platform in a sense.
Yeah. So AI is evolving at such a rapid rate. I'm sure it's evolved measurably since we started this conversation about 30 minutes ago or so. With the recent developments in AI and its super hyper evolving speed, how do you see the software landscape changing just in general?
Yeah. So I think when I look at AI, I think we had this in the past. Very often we had AI kind of used often as like some, I would call them engines, right? Some like what's also the biggest use case that we use AI today is like processing like a very clear task that only a human process behind the scenes, right? And bring it back to a human operator. And we had this with kind of ChatGPT, I think this like moment where people started to think about these interactive kind of co-pilots that can like where you can talk to parts of your data, you can reason about something in context that hasn't maybe been like scripted before. Normally in software, it's always very clear which workflows are allowed and which are not allowed and how you can interact. And that I think was like a big change. And in a sense, next evolution that's now a bit getting hyped in marketing is the idea of an agent, which is in a sense a little bit a combination of the two things. It's like this pattern where you can task a specific model with like something in natural language you can interact with. But this thing again is then something that goes out, interacts with different systems, but more in a more like flexible way to solve the task that you just like gave it. And that is, of course, in my mind, the co-pilot stage that we had, which was very great for the kind of creative fields, right? Writing a new text and something, creating new images. That was amazing for the creator economy. But if you think about supply chain, it's not that creative, right? It's like a discriminative process. However, you think about these agentic workflows now, that is, of course, very interesting because there are lots of tasks where you can think of some human currently or some system that would love to explore the world with a certain task, get back information that's in a sense the chain of the supply chain, get it back, update some internal systems, maybe respond back to a system, and having the swarm of like digital workers that can do some of these small supply chain tasks behind the scenes. I think that is in a sense the big unlock for supply chain management. However, I think there's also lots of discussion of will these interfaces that we interact with today, will they fundamentally change, right? Will everything just be a chat? And here, I think we can maybe draw some lessons from the shift to the cloud, where I think the manufacturing industry was one of the latest movers, just because the having reliability, having like auditability and all these kind of things, like were just more important than velocity and speed. So that means I think people were just very clear. It's all still auditable and clear. And I think something similar will probably happen when it comes to these AI revolutions. What that means is, I think the underlying database that you need, where you finally store which components that I purchased, or like how much to inventory do I have. I don't think that people will be fine just more merging into like a vector database that's like not human readable anymore. So you will need that fundamental data backbone, but on top can have smarter systems that can interact with this database. And that's why I think if you have, in a sense, a cloud native system with like a fundamental data model for the industry, then you can build new things on top. But you cannot also be completely disrupted from the outside, because someone else who comes in, yes, they can maybe rethink the interface AI native and it's cooler from day one, but they will still need to build that fundamental data model. And that's why I think companies who are already on a cloud native stack and have like kind of a modern UI can probably benefit a lot when they rethink some part of their processes in an AI native way. And really create completely new patterns for the supply chain teams to interact with software, right? Maybe just something that comes to their head and they can just type it out in a prompt, and then the tool is automatically applied in the UI. So a completely new way of learning also to use the software, new ways of using shortcuts. And I think that's just going to be for the operators already amazing, just how to interact with the system. And then, of course, the new things that the system can do behind the scenes will also probably be like a huge unlock. So that's where we are extremely excited about the future that AI brings to supply chain.
Yeah, I am too. Excited about AI in general. What do you see are the biggest roadblocks for implementing supply chain software? Where do your customers or the industry in general, run into obstacles and things like that, if they do?
I mean, I think that generally one of the biggest issues in my mind is often still like the gravity and inertia of just doing nothing in the status quo. So I think it's specifically like unrelated to supply chain, but in uncertain times, right? People are more often driven in a sense of the fear of messing up than the fear of missing out, because like missing an opportunity is in uncertain times is, you might not won't be great in the next yearly review, but like taking a wrong decision might get you fired, right? And I think that's generally, I think that we're still active with people. I think that like mindset is still, I think, the biggest roadblock that we see from people really driving digital transformation in general. When we then go to supply chain, I think it's very often still that we're coming from some archaic systems. Either it's like an old on-premise solution or it's some distributed Excel spreadsheets. And like getting that data like uploaded into a new system is in a sense often the second biggest challenge. So doing the internal kind of cleanup of the data to then really start acting on it. Of course, here AI is a big unlock, right? Big enablement, because the processing can now be automated a lot more. And then of course the next big thing is if you like building to really make best use of the supply chain technology, you have to kind of start onboarding your like either suppliers or customers, depending which direction you're looking. And of course, then they have to also get on board with it. And there, I think it's sometimes like the beginnings are hard, right? But once you have like critical mass, it kind of spreads a little more like wildfire. So I think the pioneers and innovators have to really want it before it then becomes just an ubiquitous standard and everyone's thinking, how could I ever live without it?
Yeah, Jim Collins, the author Jim Collins, in his book Good to Great, coined came up with a saying that good is often the enemy of great, and a lot of times good enough, status quo, as you put it, is the enemy of something much better. And there's a certain I have to say, when I was building my business, there's a certain confidence and peace in doing good enough, risk good for the, for the opportunity to do great and then maybe fail. So I totally understand that. I think that's a very common human emotion, and it does stop better methods and procedures from occurring, because people are afraid, well, what if that fails? At least what they have is working as they define working. On the subject of like overcoming things, how can companies overcome issues related to fragmented data? If you were to come into my business, if you were to have come into my business 15 years ago, not today, maybe 20 years ago, had that technology even existed then, it would have been a nightmare trying to build a supply chain management software, because we had, everything was on Post-it notes and hieroglyphics and cave drawings and things like that. It was extremely tribal. A lot of people had different pieces of the puzzle. That's called job security. Everything was fragmented, and siloed and things like that. So how do companies overcome fragmented data and information silos across their supply chains today when they're trying to implement a kind of all-in-one solution?
I think what you said, of course, the first really thing is that when we talk about digitization, we often mean like upgrading to the latest level of digital software. But of course, as you said, the first step, of course, if you really have still something on pen and paper, then this basically has to go. And I think there's just really all about having clear management decisions of that we're going to stop this. And it's definitely going to be a big change, and people will not appreciate it 100%, but there's something you just have to go through. Once you're already in like a digital realm, but just, as you said, distributed and not organized, I think it's just important to bring the business experts who can interpret the data very well, together with some people from IT that are also have the authorization in the organization to touch things, to build interfaces with things, and bring those together to really into one room to talk about, okay, what are the goals you want to achieve? What data do we need? And then, of course, on the other side, ideally, you have like a team who has done that before, can help you with that kind of data mapping, and then think, okay, what can we just lift in the cloud or into a new tool once? Where do we need a new exchange to an old system? And just mapping this out, ideally using the blueprints of implementations that you've done before to avoid some common pitfalls. Right? And that's why I think it's really technical capability, but also people who interpret the data. Because if you are just handing this off to IT, then IT might have a gazillion questions. They might read a field in an ERP system wrong. And I think that's just, where the biggest challenges are. I think it's not that much in the technology per se anymore, because we also, for example, when it comes to cleaning data, so like taking some random text descriptions where you didn't have a specific field and just making sense of that and extracting the relevant piece of it. Again, this is where AI and modern data processing tools are already good enough to just help you with processing that more effectively. But it's more do we even get access to the right pieces of content, even if they're not structured? And that just requires a team to really look at it, plan it, and then execute it.
So what, for manufacturers looking for a supply chain management system or solution, what questions should they be asking potential suppliers? I would imagine sometimes they don't know what they don't know. So it's unless you understand your entire process and the options that are available, maybe some consumers don't know what questions to ask. Help my audience understand, if they're seeking a solution like yours or others, how do you make them a savvy buyer? What types of questions should they be asking?
I think it's really one big block is what's the unit of supply that you're managing, right? Is it's an electronic component. What is the lion's share of the thing that's in the supply chain that you're procuring and buying? And
no, these are questions that they should be asking you. What?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So
Yeah, and they should be asking how are you dealing with this? Really think about look at your current setup, look at all the kind of shortcuts or workarounds you have to build, because you're what you're selling and buying and the data that you need is not functioning in the system you have right now. And really asking the supplier all the detailed questions. How can you do you talk about compliance? Do you have compliance data? Do you have this data? Do you have this element? So I'm really diving deep into how they're mapping the data pieces that you want to move around. I think that's the most, I think one of the most important questions. And I think the next big topic is that's just building a data fundamental. The second one is how do you think about collaboration with up and downstream partners or suppliers, and are there portals available? How does the workflow look for them, right? Because I think you're always asking how does it look for me, but also asking how does it look for them? Is it easy for them? Do they love using it? What's the adoption rate? So really thinking of if the supplier is happy, you're happy, right? A happy supply chain is when both sides kind of win. So just ask me from their perspective. I think that's another big advice, where I would ask them for experiences, and then I would say ask them for a little bit what we discussed, right? So what do you think? How supply chain management evolving? How are you baking in these new technologies and making sure that they're not just coming up with buzzwords and stuff, but they really come with concrete use cases. On this specific workflow, we're gonna embed something new, and really diving and giving you a good feeling that they know what they're talking about and they can provide you on a future-proof journey. But because one thing is clear, that things are changing, they're probably changing more rapidly than they have been in the last 10 years. So you need someone who can give you the confidence that they are gonna be up to speed with these rapid changes and can deliver on that. And ideally, of course, you could basically ask them, my last advice, is this software, was this architected cloud native? So someone really built it for the era of distributed computing and cloud? Or was that did they have an on-premise version that they just lifted and shifted? That's usually somehow possible, but the technical debt you've been piling up is slowing you down, and that will definitely also not allow you to make use of these most modern technologies in further developments. And the gap is only widening, and the debt is at some point is unrepayable.
What are some of the most common mistakes made when selecting or using a supply chain management system from your perspective?
I think, of course, I'm also, of course, biased, but I feel sometimes people are just over-indexing, how long has the software been around? How long has the vendor been around? Just because they want to, trust is important. But in an age where things are changing very rapidly, that might even be a misnomer, or might even be a negative argument, because the question is how quickly have they been looking at the velocity of quickly they've been changing. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes, just going for kind of tenure on how long they've been around. And the other is, I would say, underestimating velocity of a vendor and choosing basically just based on the features. They think they send out a requirements list 6 months ago, then they evaluate for 6 months. They don't even reevaluate the status quo, but making a selection based off that list, where again, the companies you want to work with that are evolving very quickly have probably caught up to your requirements list by now and have already built things that you didn't even imagine. So I think that's the next thing, underestimating velocity and how quickly in the modern age you can build new software pieces. But I think that would be the two things I feel people get wrong the most.
Sure. We'll end on this. We'll get out your crystal ball and start predicting the future. How do you think supply chain management systems will evolve to meet the growing complexity of global operations over the next several years?
So I definitely think that connectivity will just become increasingly more important. So I feel everyone should you can think about it like as a modem, right? I think your supply chain management system should also always be like your modem that can broadcast to the world, like the information feeders that you want to be broadcasted. So kind of act as a hub where others can quickly integrate from other systems and data can flow. I think the idea of like, EDI as like the old ways of connecting some old systems, I think that's just like a technology of the past. You should rather think of, okay, this is my set of data that I don't want to expose, and how can I add some maybe connectors or maybe even some digital workers so I can talk to the outside world and collect data back and forth. And I think that's the most like important thing you have to get right. Otherwise, you're like staying in this isolated, an isolated piece in the whole supply chain. But the more you can basically get the data from everyone else that you need, but also broadcast the stuff that everyone else needs. I mean, this is of course vital for if we want to get close to estimating carbon footprints, the true carbon footprints in the supply chain, or really having something like instant delivery and no more waste. Then this is, I think, vital to every business to have, in a sense, like you have a website today, right? I think everyone should have basically, in a sense, like a supply chain hub that can interact with other systems to get rid of so much manual clerk work and so many mistakes that are just happening because of intransparency and lack of automation.
So without giving away any trade secrets, what's the future of Luminovo? Where do you see your company going?
Well, I mean, we definitely have had global ambitions from day one, and I think we already have by now like over 200 customers across the globe. But we definitely want to keep investing more in the States. We already lion's share of our customers is still in Europe, but the United States now the area where we expect the most growth in the next years. In addition, also to Southeast Asia. So for us, one is the geographic expansion from the east and west, basically, and the other topic is that for us, having, I would say, like a very good footprint now in the electronics manufacturing, contract manufacturing space, connecting, like selling now our software solutions to the supply chain and procurement teams from the OEMs, because they have very similar challenges. And I think by now we have built like a very all-in-one supply chain tool that no one really had offers that can do it all from, connecting to your manufacturers, connecting to component manufacturers, to the PCB industry, and selling that even more. I think that's the other topic. And that comes with our continued ambition to just keep connecting the downstream supply chain even more, like from component manufacturers to distributors, having those direct connections, but also equipping the PCB manufacturers with tools that's needed. Again, think about this digital hub, about for them, it's prices and capabilities that this can be broadcast very effectively to other systems. So really building out the supply chain end to end, and then taking that global.
And last question, how did Luminovo get its name? Where does that come from?
Yeah, Luminovo stands for New Light, Luminovo, and I think one of our professors at Stanford, Andrew Ng, always used the term that AI is the new electricity, because he said he thinks that like the electricity 100 years ago started to change every other industry. And there are some electricity companies that are just doing that, but most people are just using it for serving another business purpose. He thinks AI will do the same. There's going to be some AI companies, but most companies will just use it as a fuel for cool things that they can do in the outside world. And we felt at that time, okay, if like AI is the new electricity, like we, as the innovators, like having studied the space, we want to be the people bringing this new light to the dark side of, in that case, supply chain, where there is still not enough light, and really bring that innovation. So that's the idea. New light as the idea of bring innovation to a place where it's desperately needed.
I love it when there's an answer to that question, that other than, I don't know, we just made it up. Or I asked one person on a different podcast. I do an entrepreneur podcast as well, and I always ask, where did the company name come from? And the answer was, it was probably a smart answer. It was, it had the best chance at search engine optimization. I'm like, okay. I do like it when there's a meaning to a name behind a company. I think that's pretty cool.
Well, the secondary things, of course, always that you have to get the domains and you have to get the trademark and so on. But that, of course,
absolutely, yes. There's some practical things too. But at least it has a root. It has a core in kind of illuminating the world and light and things like that. Yeah, that's great. Well, Sebastian, I really appreciate all the time you've given me and my audience. Thanks for
100%.
sharing. And I wish you years of continued success as you grow your company. And for my audience who would like to get more information on Luminovo, if you're watching this podcast on the Reliability Matters YouTube channel, just look down here somewhere and show more, and you'll see information on Luminovo there. If you're listening to this on your favorite podcast app, when it's safe to do so, look at the show notes on your podcast app, and Luminovo's information will be there as well. So, Sebastian, thank you so much. Are you coming out to the States anytime soon for a show or a conference?
My team is coming. Yeah, so my colleague Timon is coming over. We're going to be at some of the shows, like IPC Apex is the next one, and then there will be PCB East. So there will be quite some shows. You will see that on our LinkedIn, on our website where we're at. But yeah, we're going to come to the States and make sure that we see our customers and potential customers in person.
Excellent. Well, I know you won't be there, but I will stop by your stand at IPC Apex and say hello to the team. And tell them I have friends at the top. There we go.
Perfect.
And that would be you. Well, Sebastian, thank you so much again for all the time you've given and all the advice you've given. I really appreciate it. And again, continued success.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Well, that's another episode. Thanks for listening to or watching the Reliability Matters podcast. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe to Reliability Matters on your favorite podcast app. If you're watching this podcast on the Reliability Matters YouTube channel, be sure to like and subscribe to be notified when new episodes are released. We release new episodes on the second and fourth Tuesday of every month. A special thanks to the Printed Circuit Engineering Association's PCB Chat at pcbchat.com and Ascendo Reliability at reliability.fm for syndicating the show. Thanks also for your questions and episode suggestions. Please keep them coming. I love to hear from you. Send comments or episode suggestions to Mike at mikekonrad.com. Just remember that's Konrad spelled with a K. To learn more about the Reliability Matters podcast, please visit our website at reliabilitymatterspodcast.com. Once again, thanks for listening or watching. Until next time, keep learning, keep doing it right, and remember, reliability matters. I'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Thanks for listening to the Reliability Matters podcast. Join us on the second and fourth Tuesday of each month for new episodes of Reliability Matters.